Thank you for joining for this episode of the TechSpective Podcast. I have with me Guy from Cybersecurity. So Guy, if you want to introduce yourself and give a little bit of background.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm Guy Guzner. I'm a CEO and co-founder at Cybersecurity. I've been with cybersecurity almost my entire life. That's been the one thing that I've done in my career, being on a vendor side, developing and creating cybersecurity products. Savvy is my third company, and luckily with cybersecurity, there's an ongoing challenges and there's an ongoing need for innovation and for new technologies. And that's what I like to do. And I've been fortunate to do it for close to 30 years.
Okay. Yeah, I want to agree with your one point. Like, there is always a new thing. And it's interesting because I've had the conversation with a couple different people recently about kind of current trends in terms of mergers and acquisitions and the move towards people, certain vendors trying to pitch the all-in-one consolidated platform versus, the best of breed. And one of the things that we've talked about is, there are pros and cons. I mean, there are some things where the platform makes sense. You have one agent, one thing, whatever. But the problem with that concept is that even if you have the very best platform today, even if that platform covers everything you can possibly think of today, the landscape is constantly changing. New technology is introduced, new attack vectors are introduced. And so even if you have the best platform today, there will still be a need tomorrow for a startup to come along with a unique solution that addresses a gap in your platform.
Absolutely. And I honestly think that there's never going to be like one platform to rule them all with cybersecurity. And I actually think that the market is going in two opposite motions. In one direction, you see consolidations of technologies that have been mature, and now you want to be able to integrate them better, and then a platform makes sense. But as the threat landscape is changing, your attack surface is changing and evolving, there's also a need to go and use point solution to adapt, and it is very possible that these point solutions later become integrated within a platform, but then you'll need to use some other point solutions. So I don't think there's one strategy that is the winner here.
Right. No, I think that's very true. Because like I said, there'll always be something new. And also, like, one of the other things that we talked about is that when you first build your company, when you see a problem, you say, hey, you know what? I have a unique way to solve this problem. Let me build this. And I said, the analogy I use is like building a house. So like when I start from scratch and I say, okay, I want the bedrooms here. I want the kitchen to look like this. This is how, and you design the whole thing the way you want it. Well, 5 years later, if something new comes out and you say, you know what, I want a movie theater. I want a media room in my house, or whatever. It's like adding that on after the fact is always going to be imperfect. Like what so and that's how I view the platforms. It's like even if the platform company recognizes like, oh, there's this new need, I need to add something, you are burdened by the foundation of what you've already built, and sort of by definition can't create the very best version of what you need to create, because you need to create it in a way that fits with what you've already got.
That's also absolutely true, and it goes to even of what is you can call it the DNA of the company. Like if you started in days where everything was on-prem and you've built an on-prem product and they say, oh yeah, well, I need to think about this new thing in the cloud. It just
Right.
doesn't work if you use the same foundation and just market it now as a cloud solution. And sometimes you need it's not just how you build the product, it's how you build the company, how you build the team, the level of expertise. And we've seen this over the years that's create opportunities for new generation of companies adapting the new and shifting paradigms to create very successful products that actually obsolete those earlier generations.
Right. Okay. So let's shift gears and let's talk specifically about what you've created. So Savvy Security emphasizes complete SaaS identity control, identity hygiene. So can you elaborate a little bit on what you've created and what makes your approach unique?
Sure. So Savvy is an SaaS security company that is focusing on the identity side of SaaS, because what happens that when you're using SaaS, software is no longer within your perimeter. So even if in the past you can control access to those software assets with having access to the perimeter, that doesn't work anymore. And so identity has effectively become the gateway to SaaS and the gateway to a lot of sensitive data and mission critical systems. And the way that it's being consumed today is also different, because if in the past a lot of the IT was sanctioned and deployed by IT, it's changing. Users can onboard applications, they can sign up for stuff, and they start using it and adopting it, and maybe then paying with their credit card, and that creates a decentralized model where centralized identity management doesn't work anymore. So Savvy was created to find all these gaps within the traditional way of managing identities, and then find what are the accounts that are not being centrally managed. What is the posture of those accounts? Are they been using single sign-on, MFA? Do they have the right identity hygiene? Then highlight the ones that are critical, because maybe there's a privileged access, maybe there's access to sensitive information, and then being able to remediate that, but don't rely on central integration with all those applications, because one of the things that we see with SaaS adoptions that it's massive. Like if in the past people were using a handful of applications, we go to organizations and we show them you have thousands of different applications that people are using. So it just becomes very hard to manage. And that's what we're solving.
Okay. Well, and one of the things that's interesting about that is, and I feel like this is pretty much true of almost any of the technology shifts or whatever that we've had, but it is a double-edged sword. Like SaaS applications were kind of a lifesaver for the pandemic, because as organizations like overnight said, oh, everyone has to go work remotely from home. It's like, well, if everything was on-prem, if everything had been we can only do this in our own network, that would have been a huge problem. But it made it real easy, because I can just go home and I can log into Microsoft 365, I can log into Salesforce, I can log into whatever I need. Everything I need was a SaaS app. And so I think that kind of, the companies that weren't already fully on board with SaaS apps around 2020 said, hey, you know what, this is a lifesaver, we should use this. But then you have to then come back and say, okay, well, now that we're using it, how does that change my attack surface? How does that change what I'm trying to defend, and how do I defend it effectively?
That's right, and I think that companies that want to get an advantage in a highly competitive business environment, they have to embrace SaaS, and they have to embrace change, and that helps with situations of application availability, like with COVID. But it also have advantages in terms of availability of the solutions and the resilience, which I think resilience is becoming super critical factor when you think about IT. And finally, about productivity and what you can achieve, because one of the things that we've seen as a big, massive adoption of AI enabled services that drive more functionality and productivity. If in last year we've seen, people at the beginning of the year starting to use just ChatGPT, and then later Gemini and Copilot, we go now and we see with organizations that are embracing it, that they use tens and like 90 different AI-enabled tools and services that allow them to do things more efficiently. And this is where business advantages are going to come. So if you don't embrace it, you will stay behind. The question is, what is the price in terms of security? And then how do you address that gap?
Okay. So, like I said, I feel like SaaS apps were already on the rise anyway, and then the pandemic came along and everything kind of skyrocketed. And so, again, pros and cons, because that enables so much more productivity, remote productivity. But to your point with resilience, it's like, I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus, but we just experienced a massive global outage, and then you learn very quickly, like, okay, well, what do I have access to and what don't I have access to? So that's one issue, but the other issue is the SaaS sprawl. And I mean, I think you mentioned already, the kind of the hundreds and the thousands of apps that are on a network that IT may not even know about. So, like how do you approach that? How does Savvy approach that? How does Savvy help me if I'm an IT admin? How does it help me manage SaaS sprawl?
Well, the first thing is, how do you know about that sprawl? How do you know about all these apps and all these different identities? And the reality that if you go for your standard ways to manage your identities, you will know only about the things that you know about, but there's the things that you don't know about. So at first is, how do you do discovery to find tools that people have signed up for and they didn't involve IT, or they were going under the radar? And for that, we created an architecture that is connecting to your identity environment and is getting data from them to correlate that with what we see from other sources. But we also created 4 different ways to collect data. We're looking at email to see sign up messages, because you sign up to an application, you get some email, or you have some activity like resetting a password. There's an activity, there's evidence that you have an account in that organization. We have a browser extension that allows us in real time see who is going to which application, but then not just that they're going to that application, that how they go there. Do they use their corporate credentials? Do they go through an MFA and so on? And then the last way is that we have API connectors that are able to pull data from different applications, so we can centralize that. But one step that we've taken that is that we also implemented this connector technology within our browser extension. So let's say you go to some unmanaged application, our browser extension is able to create API calls to that application, understand whether you are the administrator of that application, what is the posture of that application, are there any other user accounts defined there? And we call it a zero-touch integration because you didn't really need to know anything about that application. And just by the fact that you went there, we were already able to pull this data, report it back to the IT and the security teams.
Okay. Yeah, I think the all of those are good, but the one that kind of stands out to me is the email approach. I think that's interesting to say, hey, look, when I sign up for whatever, I'm going to get a verification email that says, hey, click this link or whatever to access blah blah blah, and that's something that would typically fly under the radar of IT admins and such, but is also an easy tell for all right, well, I know Tony signed up for this service because I can see the email.
Exactly, and we can also see if there's something suspicious, like did someone generate a reset password or some identity changes within that that account. There's usually a notification, and that doesn't require an integration. And it also helps, but because when we go to an organization, emails has history, so we can say, well, Tony, you signed up for this application a year ago, and you may have forgotten about it, but this account is still open. So we find about dormant and stale accounts, and then maybe if there's some kind of third-party, vulnerability with some account, we can say, well, look, we see some users that sign up for this account. These accounts are still open, and you may not even know about it because nobody's using them anymore,
right,
but they're still open.
Well, and actually, it's a good segue because that was actually going to be more or less my next question. But so I've had that experience myself in terms, and a lot. I mean, there are probably hundreds of things that I have filled out a form for that I technically have credentials to access that I've never even thought about it. There's lots of things that I that require you to supply some kind of credentials and sign up just to see it, and then you look at it and you go, nah, but but the credentials are still out there. So from just from a kind of username and password perspective, that's a problem. It's like, technically speaking, I probably still have a MySpace account out there somewhere. I haven't looked at it in 20 years, but it probably exists. And so those things are obviously an issue. So my next question was actually going to be about kind of the identity hygiene aspect of things, and it's not really a SaaS application per se, but like when you look, you go back and look at Colonial Pipeline and how that breach occurred, that ransomware attack occurred because they had a dormant VPN account they forgot to take care of, and so those things expose you to significant risk.
Exactly, and the reality is that when we're all making those decisions to sign up and give our credentials, in many times we don't keep proper hygiene. We see from our install base that around 65% of the users have some kind of an hygiene violation. That means that they will reuse the same password between different services. Like they will use their social network account with a work account or with something else. People are even using accounts that have been already known to be compromised within some kind of data breach. And we've seen like those mega identity breaches of billions of different of identities. And it comes back to the reality that a lot of the times, people are not that mindful about cybersecurity, and we're all lazy. So you rely on users to make good decisions. That's not necessarily what happens in practice.
Right. Well, and I've talked about this on previous podcasts, but I'm guilty myself to some extent. Like I try to apply some logic to this where I say, okay, is this account one that I care if it gets compromised? So if it's for like, you know, I don't know, just a retail site where I'm not storing my credit card
Yeah.
info, it's just, so I can log in. I'm like, I don't really care if I use the same password because if you get that password, you're only going to be able to get into other similar sites. So I mean, so I have like a password that I'll use for like a bunch of those
And
sites. But then if I'm talking about my bank, my credit cards, my email account, sensitive
yeah.
things, then I'm like, okay, well, these need more secure passwords. These need unique passwords because I don't want someone who, you know, gets my credit
Yeah.
card, info to be able to break into my email or vice versa or whatever. But, to your point, a lot of people don't necessarily do that, and we see a lot of attacks
No.
that are that like there's a password dump from. I mean, I just got a letter last week from Ticketmaster. So I guess
No.
Ticketmaster was breached, and they're like, "Hey, just letting you know,
Mm.
and and off the top of my head, I might think, I don't really care if Ticketmaster was breached, but the question is, can an attacker extract the passwords from that breach and then just go out and see, okay, well, what else does Tony Bradley use? Where else is Tony Bradley logged in? Let's go try this password out and see if it works."
Yeah, and that's exactly what attackers are doing, and they have this. They will compromise something that was less secure. Then they can do brute force hacking of those passwords, and then start spraying credentials and see where else they get access. And the reality is that we also see that sometimes the people may be using a different password, but they have some kind of templates, like just changing one character or something, so it makes it easier to remember, and that reduces the amount of effort that actually required to hack into something. And then, well, you can say, well, okay, let's say that happens, I'm still protected by multi-factor authentication. But we also see that that's not also a silver bullet. We've seen uh, MFA stuffing attacks where you just get so many notifications and someone, eventually approve them. We've seen situations that because of all different types of configuration changes and considerations that it is disabled. So there is no like one solution. So once I implement an MFA, I'm
Right.
covered.
Right. I mean, I feel like, MFA2, every aspect of kind of a layered defense, I feel like is valid. None of them are a silver bullet, but I often go back to like the early days of Wi-Fi when we had WEP encryption. They very quickly figured out, I create this tool, I can crack your WEP encryption in under a minute. And so people were like, all right, well, I guess that encryption's useless. And I used to say, well, no, turn it on. And I mean, if you can go, upgrade to WEP 2, upgrade to WPA as soon as you can. But if as long as all you have is WEP, at least leave it on, because not everybody who comes across your network is going to have WEP crack, or they'll go to the next house. Like if they're doing like a drive-by thing, they're going to go for the easiest attack. And so like, why would they bother cracking your Wi-Fi if the guy next to you isn't using encryption at all? So I'm like, you use what you can. And so like with MFA and 2FA, I definitely understand like the texting and SMS code is an imperfect version because it's real easy for someone to just clone my phone and get that code. So that's not great, but it's still better than not having that. If those are your choices.
Yeah, I think that in general, security needs to be built with several layers and fail-safe mechanisms. So if, and then you the whole defense in depth also line of thing, that if one of them is breached, then you have others, and and monitoring and making sure that each one of them is actually configured. That's become critical, especially in the SaaS world where, like I say, there's no perimeter. There's nothing else that will stand in the way in the end if that something like that is getting breached.
All right. Well, and I also I've said for 20 years now, whenever we talk about encryption and we say, oh, well, this is blah, 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 256-bit encryption, it will take, 4 million years to brute force this. And I'm like, unless you guess it right on the first try.
Yeah.
Like that, I mean, what they're saying is it would take you 4 million years to go through every possible combination, but that assumes that your password is the very last combination. And it's like, what if your password is 111111 or whatever? It's like, that's going to be the first guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's actually proven that password complexity and password rotations are not that effective as a policy. And like I said, when you force people also to change password too much, they tend to go with easy to guess patterns that makes that easier. I think also that another aspect that we need to look is that once you get access to one system, with the way that SaaS is architected today, that it makes it very easy to connect different applications. It's the whole app-to-app risk model, which is problematic, because maybe I signed up for some application and that's is checking my email for grammars or something, but I granted it now access to my emails, super sensitive stuff. Someone out there is now holding a token that will allow them to access all that email.
Right.
So even if that application is thinking, I don't store anything sensitive there, there's no credit card or anything. But if that holds the privileges to go and to look for other stuff, this is also where breaches are happening. And not to name some very well-known companies that's exactly what happened to them.
Well, and I've also, and I can't remember exactly which apps or services it was, but on more than one occasion, I've signed up for a service or logged into a service and gotten, some sort of a pop-up alert, but basically asking me to grant permission on behalf of my organization. So it's like, okay, wait, so you're saying that I, Tony Bradley, am now giving you, SaaS app vendor, application to the whole company by virtue of checking this box.
Yeah, that happens. There's actually a security configuration that there could be a policy whether you can do this for on behalf of the entire organization or not. But if not, it just becomes very hard to manage, because now someone needs to go and approve all those requests and grant them. And what we typically see is that people always ask for access. So we go to organizations and then we see a lot of applications with a lot of access, but then we look and they're not being even used. They've been dormant for 2 years and stuff like that, because nobody asks to remove access. Like once you finished using with others, we won't say the security team, I don't need this. Let's go to list privileges and remove that access. So we just see that piling up, and eventually, if some of them is breached, then again, you're
And
exposed.
it's also one of those things that like every IT admin, every IT security, everyone knows logically that there should be a process, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever, to go through and say, hey, let's review these permissions and see, like, do you still need these? Should we shut some of these down? The thing is, that's everyone's overwhelmed with actually day-to-day stuff and granting permission to new stuff, so nobody ever has the time to do that. It's always the last thing they're going to do, so no one ever gets around to it. So like you said, I was an IT admin at one point, so I know it's definitely a squeaky wheel gets the grease scenario where, like, if you're coming to me and saying, hey, listen, I need access to this application in order to get my job done, I'm going to grant you that access, and A, so you can get your job done, and B, so you'll leave me alone so I can get my job done. And but then a month from now, it's not going to occur to me to go back to you and say, hey, guy, are you done using that? Can I disable that access now?
Exactly. I mean, that's what should happen in theory, but I think that we're talking here on a scale where you have, and we see in organization, thousands of applications being used across many different users. It just becomes unmanageable. So that's why you need to be able to automate stuff, find the most risky, toxic combinations, find the top 10 that you should take care of and remove, and not try to do this for everything, because I think that overall IT teams did not scale as much of the wealth of different applications and SaaS services. I mean, if 10 years ago people were using 15 applications, today the average is a few hundreds. Your IT team did not grow in that same order of magnitude.
Right. What is user experience, and when it comes to cybersecurity, user experience is a huge deal. Like there have been plenty of security tools that were very good at what they did, but because they kind of got in the way or impede things, and I'm thinking back, you go back 10, 20 years when everyone wanted to disable their Symantec and disable their McAfee because it was slowing their system down or whatever. So obviously user experience is a big deal. What is the user experience like when it comes to Savvy? Does the user see anything, or is it purely just you're giving visibility to the IT team to know what's going on?
Well, user experience is the key here. And if there is something that I learned in my security career, and I did work for some of the companies mentioned, and I worked for network security companies where, they had a binary policy of allow or block. Now, if the user experience becomes so bad that people can just do their work, they will complain, and then you will disable the security control, because normally in most places the business win. You can't block the business, and then you end up with no security at all. So one of the things that we tried with Savvy is offer an alternative here. So it's not a binary decision. We're going to block you from doing something. We are going to allow this, but within some specific guardrails. Like, you want to use this new application, that's fine. But in order to use that application, make sure that you're not doing any kind of a violation, and we can guide you on how to do that, and guide you to make sure that application is protected with MFA or whatever other protection that you want. So that's offering a way to become an enabler. Like, I'm not saying, okay, I'm going to block you, but you want to use it, I'll give you some guardrails, and then you can do your work and we don't impact your productivity, and there's less pressure on the IT and the security teams to make those exceptions and make those sacrifices that eventually disable security completely.
Yeah. Well, there was a company I worked with a few years back that had like one of the ways they addressed the issue of identity and access hygiene was there were periodic, I want to say it was quarterly, it was at least annually, reviews that were done by the IT team that were, so basically they defaulted to limited duration approval. So there wasn't any like, oh, I'm going to grant you this a permission and it's going to go on forever. It was by default, the permission would end after 3 months or the permission would end after a year, and you would have to you would get an alert like a month ahead of time saying, hey, do you still use this? Do you still need this? So there was a little bit of a proactive sense to it. But the thing that doesn't really address necessarily is the account still existing in the world. So like if I have a Dropbox account and my IT admin grants me access so that I can use my Dropbox account with work or whatever, and then 3 months from now they take away that access, it doesn't change that account still exists somewhere in the Dropbox world. And if I've used the same password and Dropbox gets breached, there is still that part of it, where they can come in and go, oh, well, I can't access Dropbox, but what else can I access with these credentials? And so, like that problem still exists on some level.
That problem still exists, and disabling the access to the account definitely helps minimizing the attack surface there, but it's not eliminating it completely. And then we did hear about some cases, someone is getting access to some system, they look at some of the disabled account, re-enable them. So these are well-known accounts within the system, and now they have some kind of a backdoor account that were in the system, so it's not flagging anything suspicious. So in the end, removing and offboarding accounts completely is a big challenge, and it's also one of the things that we're doing. We're seeing those challenges also when people are leaving the company. That for some of the account, their access is being removed and the account is being removed, but for other systems, they still have access. I have employees, not to name the name of the companies of where they worked before, but they still have access to GitHub accounts that
Right.
Belong to those companies and to other places.
It definitely happens. So like I also won't name companies, but there was a media outlet that I wrote for in like the early 2010s. Like, I don't know, 7-8 years after I was done writing for them, I still had a valid email address on their system. I had another instance like that recently. Oh, I just received a notification from LinkedIn saying that an ad campaign had expired for a company I haven't worked for 5 years. So they, apparently I'm still an admin in their LinkedIn system for running ad campaigns.
Yeah, there was actually a funny story. It was on the news. Someone working for a media company, again, let's not say which, there and he was terminated, not working for that company. It still have the Slack access. He changed his logo to be the Slack bot, like with like an angry face, and he was trolling people on their Slack channels for 2 years until they found out about it.
Interesting.
Yeah, that was very funny.
But yeah, but I mean, it goes back to, and I had this problem at a company I worked with a few years ago. I managed the social media and our online ad campaigns, and we had like an employee advocacy thing. Bottom line, I had reason to need to know when someone left the company so that I could turn off certain access. And no matter how many times I tried to like have this conversation with HR to say, listen, I need to be in this loop. Like I keep finding out like 3 months after the fact that, oh, guy doesn't work here anymore. And I'm like, okay, well, like how hard would it be to just keep me, add me to the email distribution list that says, hey, guy doesn't work here anymore, so that I don't have to find out about it after the fact. And I never did get that worked out. I mean, so companies struggle with those kind of things, that like not everyone who needs to know when someone has joined the company or someone has left the company is actually in the loop to get that information.
Yeah, well, I think that this situation is improving, and it's actually something that we help with too, because once companies are using the kind of an HR platforms, things like Workday, Bamboo, and so forth, you can get from an API, you can get this, and then you can get notifications on joiners, lever movers, and that way uh, you can automate this, and then we have this flow and in our product where we can get the notification about that, see what kind of access this user has, what are the applications that are part of the federated access that he can remove easily. And then for the others that maybe they signed up with their corporate email, we can generate a request to reset the password. Like the person is going to the website, clicking on a reset password link. There's a mail sent to that mailbox. We can intercept that email, and and then go to that website and just change the password and disable the access. So even if someone signed up, you don't have access to that account, they left the company, there's still ways where you can terminate that access and offboard that account.
Right. Okay. So just kind of winding things down, I want to kind of just ask you, given what you see now in terms of the attack surface, the threat landscape, et cetera, and where things are trending, like what do you think customers, organizations need to be thinking about for the next year, the next 2 years, or whatever? What's on the horizon?
Well, I think that first customers need to understand that we need to embrace the change and the wealth of innovation that is coming, and that's super positive. We're living in a great time where we see how AI is the transforming a lot of what we're doing. So I think that we need to embrace this, and when we need to embrace this, we need to understand that the big challenge is going to be first about visibility. How do you know about those things that are happening? How do you not go back to the old allow and block mentality and paradigm? And once you have this visibility, is how are you able to effectively manage this through automation and remediation, so it doesn't become a huge IT effort, because otherwise the scale will be just too big.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we this might be the first podcast I've done in the last year and a half where we didn't spend the entire time talking about AI and generative AI and
Yeah, well, maybe one thing about AI, I think it's great, and especially there are use cases for that within security. I will not say AI again is the silver bullet for everything. Like if you went to the last RSA, every security vendor is now AI enabled, and now there solves the world problems with AI. It's definitely going to help us, but let's not forget the basic. We still need to keep doing that. We're not going to be replaced with the machine that soon.
right.
That's my take.
Well, right. No, it's definitely true, and like it's like, and it's kind of interesting, ironic in some ways for cybersecurity in particular to be so gung ho about jumping on the generative AI bandwagon, because AI and ML are not new. AI and ML are the foundation of all of cybersecurity already. So now all we've done is add this like semi-conversational piece on top of it so that I can talk to the AI in natural language, but it doesn't change anything on the back end per se. And there was one vendor I talked to about a year ago, where this person I was speaking with was frustrated because they were this close to launching a kind of a chat bot for their customer, like a customer service chat bot, and their CEO kind of pulled the plug on it and said, "Well, no, I need you to go back and make it generative AI, like we need to be able to say that it's generative AI." And they were like, "Why? It does what we want it to do." But it's just a we need to be able to put the words generative AI on our marketing materials.
Yeah, generative AI definitely become the new zero trust of cybersecurity. So you have to sprinkle that somewhere in your website.
Right. Well, and like you said, I mean, it's like it does a lot of great things, but it's not a silver bullet. It's not magic. It's not going to solve everything for you. Like so by all means, understand what it does, embrace it, leverage it, use it as much as you can, but don't try to package your product as if you throwing the words generative AI on there means that it's magically going to solve my problems for me.
Exactly. And the way that we look at it at Savvy is like we look at some of the architecture and the technology problems that we are trying to solve, and then for specific things, for specific tasks, we will use some kind of an AI model created to help with that task. That if that can help with automating some manual analyst work, looking at analyzing, like I talked about this email integration, that makes sense. But you have to be much more specific at where exactly it helps you and what is the advantage that you're getting.
Right. Makes sense. All right. Well, I would like to thank you for taking the time to join me. It was a fun conversation.
Well, thank you very much for having me here. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate you investing your time to listen to the podcast, but I also invite you to engage on social media. Please go like our Facebook page and follow at TechSpective on Twitter and Instagram. You can feel free to let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like, let me know if you love it, let me know if it sucks, and let me know what products you'd like to see reviewed or what questions you'd like to see answered in future posts.